Welcome back to another episode of Interview with Scientists series. Today we have Dr. Joanne Kamens, who is the Executive Director of Addgene, a mission driven nonprofit dedicated to helping scientists around the world to share useful research, reagents, and data. Today we'll talk with Dr. Kamens about Addgene, entrepreneurship, career development, mentoring, and workplace diversity. Thank you, Dr. Kamens, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our
Good
pleasure.
way to start my day.
Great, glad to hear that. So, our first question to you is: can you tell us about a little bit about your PhD and postdoc work?
Yeah, sure. So I went straight from college where I was a biology major. I was pre-med for about 6 months because that's what nice Jewish girls do when they're good at science. And within 6 months, I already knew I was science track. So I got into a lab very early and had a great mentor as an undergrad, actually. Guy named Eric Weinberg studying histone genetics at University of Pennsylvania.
Yep.
And then I went straight to grad school, loved biology, super excited about it, at Harvard in the Division of Medical Sciences. That's the medical school PhD program. And I did my work on yeast transcription genetics. So I worked with Roger Brent, who was the first person to actually fuse two parts of a program and of a protein together and show that both parts worked.
Okay.
So think like Lexay fusions. People didn't think that you could just slap two pieces of a protein together and that these fusions would be functional.
Yep.
So I worked with those fusion proteins to work on what turned out to be NF-kappa B family members as transcription factors.
Okay.
And then I went straight to pharma. So I didn't do a postdoc.
Okay.
I had a baby in grad school. So I defended my thesis. I was about 6 months pregnant, and then my advisor paid me to stay in the lab. So it was sort of a postdoc, but it was really in the same lab, doing a different project. I actually did a different project. And then transitioned directly to pharma with his help and his connection. So I think this is pre-internet. So, knowing people was even more important. I mean, it's always important,
Yes.
but in those days, the jobs were in the newspaper. So, and I did bench work in industry for about 10 years or so, and then transitioned into managing science.
Okay.
So, yeah.
That's a great journey from academics to industry.
Yeah, I was lucky. I guess one reason why I do a lot of career stuff is because being lucky is not a great way to advance your career. Like, I mean, I went to my advisor and I don't really understand this angst about academia industry.
Yeah.
It was so clear to him that academia wasn't the path for me.
Yes.
He's been super supportive. Like, I'm a scientist. There's no question that I'm a scientist. I had good training. He was a fantastic mentor. But I wasn't interested in an academic career, and I knew I wouldn't be good at it. Like, there's so many parts of that type of career that are suited to a very specific personality.
Yes.
And the right people should stay in academia. We need great scientists doing
Definitely.
training and mentoring. But in my case, he was like, yep, I know some people in biotech and pharma. I'll make introductions. He introduced me to 3 people. I got 2 interviews. I got an offer.
Yeah.
I took it. I worked there for 15 years. So I'm a big proponent of doing that in a more intentional way. I did it kind of, I went to him and said, look, I have a baby. I can't afford academia right now. He's like, okay, well, we'll get you a job,
Yes.
So,
No, good mentors are really important in life.
huge. Yeah, I know we'll talk more about that, but
Yes.
I was blessed. I was certainly blessed.
So let's talk a little bit about Addgene. How did the idea of Addgene come about, and how did the founders come up with the name?
Yeah, so I think so. Melina Fan was a biology graduate student at MIT, and at Harvard. She was an MIT undergrad. Her husband was a grad student in software engineering, and her brother is a financial person, and has And so the 3 of them, it was her idea. In her thesis, she did a screen for some oncogenes and uncovered about 10 genes she wanted to study at that time. This was in 2006, 6-ish.
Okay.
And she wrote away to all the scientists to get the plasmids for these genes and got no responses. And the one she got was wrong. The plasmid was wrong. So that she's very entrepreneurial. Her family is very entrepreneurial. They come from a very entrepreneurial family. Her father is an entrepreneur as well. So they come by it honestly. Yeah. And she said there must be a better way to do this. So they worked very, very hard on the model of Addgene. It wasn't obvious. It wasn't easy getting people to even think about sharing in those days. But they had some very good strategic decisions about who to approach first, how to do it, how to handle the legalities and the technical transfer aspects, and just really good planning. Melina is still the chief scientific officer of Addgene, and she's delightful to work with in that capacity. She's very entrepreneurial. So that's how Addgene started, and in the I think in 2007, I think or 2004 maybe is the official founding. I even forget at this point. We're like 16 years old, so 2004 is the official founding of Addgene. And then by 2007, they were already doing enough distribution to sort of support the financially. So it took a while to get off the ground. And Addgene stands for, I always forget. Something, distribute, and disseminate. I'll have to look it up. But the ADD stands for something. I just like drawing a blank on what exactly it stands for. But it's actually been very fortuitous because this is pre-internet, really, or just the bones of the internet. Yes. And it turns out that the word Addgene is not anything else. Like no one else has that. So when you search for Addgene online, it's just us. For the most part, and that turns out to be like a really important thing in 2021, or even in the 20 those years. So it was, and also A is good. It's toward the beginning of the alphabet, so you come up first on the list. So it turned out they didn't know about social media, but it turned out to be a really good handle to have for the company.
Yes. So social media branding is just booming up. So Addgene, yes. When I searched Addgene yesterday, the first thing came up was Addgene.
Yeah, exactly. It's very easy, and we like that. It's a good, good identity, if you will.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, why is Addgene a nonprofit?
Yeah, so that was an interesting choice and a fortuitous one on the part of the founders. Addgene's mission is really to increase sharing and openness of materials. And, scientists are a little skittish about that, as are their organizations. They're not always eager to do that. And by being a nonprofit, it really increased the trust of the tech transfer and scientific community in essentially sharing their materials through Addgene. Our mission is to disseminate and get them credit for their work, not to commercialize, take their work from them. We're just a broker. We distribute materials, but they're not owned by Addgene. They're owned by the universities in which they were discovered, technically owned. And so I think that decision led to a couple things. One was just much more success on depositing and trust of the community. But now we just really like being a mission-driven organization and being able to make decisions that benefit scientists instead of, stockholders or, it's not that we're financially irresponsible. Addgene is a very carefully planned organization. We're revenue driven, so we have to have good revenue models and good business practices. So we run very much like a for-profit from a best practices standpoint. But when we make decisions, it's not always because of money. It can often be because it's just the right thing to do for the mission.
Okay. That's a great start. So how was funding raised to start Addgene?
Addgene bootstrapped. It's in the beginning, a lot of work was sort of done for free by the founders. Doing the research, doing the beginning work. Harvard gave them a bench or a small lab for a while in Central Square, in Kendall Square, actually, not Central Square, Kendall Square, back in the day. And that was kind of the first location for the company. And they, borrowed a little money here and really bootstrapped. So they did not have grants at the time. In fact, they tried to do some grants and like NIH and some large granting organizations really did not understand what they were trying to do. Open science was not even a vision at that point. Repositories it wasn't understood at all what they were trying to do. And so also the importance of doing it as an independent entity, not associated with any specific university.
Yeah.
That's really important for Addgene's mission, because we are an archive, and universities can take away your space, funding can change, PIs can retire. It's not good to be completely grant driven for what we do, to be stable, to be stable for the community. And so it really helped us to have us be independent, and it really helped us to further the mission in that way.
Okay. So you have been working at both large companies and startups. So what are the advantages over large companies over startups, or vice versa?
Yeah, so people ask me, like, should they start at a pharma or a biotech? I'm like, just get your first job, whatever it is. I loved my career differences. Like, I'm not knocking any one of my pharma. Then I went to biotech. I did a very fast-paced biotech called RxI. I was the director of research there. And that was super fun. Again, starting at about 18 people, which is about how big Addgene was when I started at Addgene, was very startup-y at the time.
Okay.
So when I went to pharma, I have to say what I liked about that was the incredible resources for education.
Okay.
There were constant seminars, talks, people doing interesting things that were different from what I did, that I could have lunch with, learn from the organization, from internals. So they could really talk to you because we work at the same company, So I learned a huge amount from those resources. And for me, everything from the business side to the, I was just interested in all the manufacturing. Like, they were making in the back of my company when I worked at Abbott, we were manufacturing, giant vats of Humira antibody drug, monoclonal antibody it's a very famous rheumatoid arthritis drug. And, there were like 6,000 liter tanks making, Humira in the back from eukaryotic cells. It was fascinating. Like, I toured there and talked to the manufacturing people. It was just fascinating. So there was a lot of stuff to learn internally, and I took advantage of all of those opportunities. Training courses in management and science and whatever came along, I tried to do it, In biotech, you don't have that same kind of infrastructure, so you have to go externally to get your information. But the fun thing about biotech is you get to wear a lot of hats.
Yes.
So you're not pigeonholed into one job ever, because there's just too much for too few people to do. Yes. So I joined as director of research, but very quickly I was doing, working with the board and doing presentations and selling and pitching and going to bio and writing press releases. And, there were just tons of interesting new things to do. Yes. And I think scientists like to learn new things. We don't really care what they are. I don't, I'll speak for myself. Like, it could be science, it could be other stuff. I don't know. Learning new things is fun. So for me, that barrage of new opportunities to try new tasks, to be given new responsibilities was really rewarding.
Yes.
And so for me, that's the thing in biotech, is you're not pigeonholed. You're kind of a broad, experience that you get to have. So
that's exactly what I say when people ask, what is the difference between working in a startup versus a big company?
There's other differences, but I think that's the biggest one. And you can go either way, you can go either way, back and forth if you know people. So
and startup gives you like multiple hats to wear, as you mentioned. So that's a big advantage. You learn. If you are just coming out of graduate school, you will learn a lot of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is, fantastic. Yes. I mean, that's what we love. We love to learn new stuff. I think that's what defines our being scientists,
Yes.
Yeah.
So what motivates you to do your day-to-day work? I know COVID time has been hard, so what motivates you?
Yeah, COVID time was hard. What motivated? I mean, I'm just so lucky. I was, even when I was in for-profit, all of which I loved, I did a lot of nonprofit work. I founded our Massachusetts chapter of Association for Women in Science. I've been involved in diversity for decades now, not just a few years, like many people. and working with science careers for that reason, from a diversity and inclusion perspective, working with trainees and scientists in training. So for me, what motivates me is making that change in the world, I would say, and coming to work for a salary in a nonprofit has been really fantastic. Addgene is fantastic. One great thing about the pandemic for us is we were really in the right place to make an impact by supporting scientists doing research on SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19. So within weeks, in March of 2020, in the before time, we had to close down very precipitously because a case was reported in our building. And at that time, I'm sure you remember, we didn't know what was going on. Like, you didn't know how to catch it. You didn't know. It was terrifying. So we sent everybody home because people were too anxious to work. We just sent everybody home. But within days, scientists were begging us to accept deposits because they wanted to share their SARS-CoV-2 constructs. And we entered a big collaboration with Ginkgo that synthesized about 4,000 plasmids with parts of SARS-CoV-2 fused to different things and for different expression systems to just enable rapid study and research. So we came back to work about 10 days later, already planning these deposits. And within weeks, we're turning them around. We've distributed about 12,000 directly COVID related, plus, of course, we have 100,000 items in the catalog. So we really were able to make an impact. And that is, if you do anything during a pandemic, if you can help a little bit, it feels a little better, So we were able to help a little bit, I think. And that was really rewarding. It has certainly been stressful from a leadership perspective, managing a group of people and being responsible for their safety and their health. Every day, my decisions were somewhat stressful. And not to mention, we have about 100 Addgenes, and everybody had, including myself, had times of, stress and anxiety and giving people space, but still getting the work done, because our work was important during this time, and as it always is. So last month was it took a year. We had a much reduced distribution. I also had to raise money because Addgene runs a very close budget. So when we didn't distribute for much of March or April in the world, we were below budget, and it would have affected the company pretty dramatically. So we raised some funds through a payroll protection loan, as well as a big grant from Chan Zuckerberg, which was super helpful to get us through the shortfall. We never had any grants at Addgene, or very little grants. So it was the first time. And then also a grant called Fast Grants, which was amazing, which was some money that also helped us get through this shortfall. So we've spent the year kind of recovering, and then last month was our best month ever as far as distribution. So I don't know, back to normal. It could just be a blip, but the world is doing science, and we're distributing again. So happy about that.
Great, because I saw, I think in May or June last year on social media that you started coming back to the lab and shipping items. So that was something great to see.
They were heroes. Let me tell you, the Addgenes have been in the lab working on site for over a year, so 365 days, with no transmission on site. Incredible safety protocols, incredible community. Like, anybody who was sick or was exposed stayed home, which meant that other people needed to do their work. So we're shipping over 800 items a day. So if you don't ship 800 items on Monday, on Tuesday, it's 1,600 items. So any day that anyone is out, we don't have a lot of extra staff, puts stress on everybody. And so I can't say enough about how the Addgenes stepped up to really make sure we could keep functioning and support science.
Definitely, Addgene has been a backbone for many scientists.
We hope so. We hope so.
No, it is. So what piece of advice do you have for graduate students or postdoc who want to move to entrepreneurship?
Yeah, you can't wait until you're done with science. If you get out of grad school and you haven't thought about your career before then, you're kind of in trouble. You basically have no choice but to do a postdoc, which you don't really have to do. You're a scientist already. You could move directly into the career that you want if you've met enough people and done enough exploration at the time. So, I guess I would give two pieces of advice. One is choose a mentor lab. If I could talk to every first year grad student and tell them like what are the priorities for choosing a lab, it would help.
Yes.
And the first one is choose a mentor that's going to support your career exploration and your transition, because only 15% of current trainees are going to get academic tenure track positions.
Yes.
And I do not want to see the other 85% not doing science. And we need you. I'm not one of those people who thinks we have too many PhDs.
Yes.
We need scientists in all sectors, and academia may not be right for you. If you don't explore, you won't find the other opportunities, of which there are a million other opportunities. So I guess my most important piece of advice is choose your mentor well. Choose a mentor that's ethical, that supports, diverse experiences, that supports any type of transition, academia, non-academia. It's just jobs. It's not career. It's not like it's not an alternative.
Yes.
It's just diversity of choices.
Yep.
And that they are an ethical kind of role model for you. I think we have a lot of fantastic mentors in science. Unfortunately, we're brought down by the few really toxic ones who are bullies or harassing, unfortunately. So do your research ahead of time. You can do that. I have a blog on the Addgene, or a webinar on the Addgene YouTube site, I think, called How to Choose a Lab.
Yep.
And some blogs on that topic. Really put some work into it. It's a really big decision. I was like, oh, this is cool science. I rotated in the lab. I had fun. I joined the lab.
Yep.
I got lucky. I had all those things. Someone who supported my growth, my transition, my education, my baby. I had a baby. That was not, at the time, there was no framework for that. He just said, we're going to just do what's right. We're going to pay you. We're going to support you. You can stay in the lab, so you really want to make sure that you're choosing your mentor correctly. And the field of research almost doesn't matter so much. It matters that you're going to learn how to be a good scientist.
Yes.
And, be supported in your career. So that's probably my primary piece of advice.
Thank you. Most of the students, including me, when I was a grad student, I had this idea, like, even if I move into industry, I have to become a scientist, because I was a scientist, but there are other career paths. So could you just tell us a little bit more about different career paths?
Well, okay, so you're always going to be a scientist.
Yes, but
that's not negotiable.
Yes.
So you're always going to be a scientist. It's a way of thinking. You're stuck with it. I mean, I got my first microscope when I was 9 years old. I've probably been a scientist since I was 9 years old. So you're just trained in, the scientific education, which is a fantastic one, actually, apprenticeship system. So the question is, how do you use that science? And you can use it pipetting, and you can use it not pipetting. And if you're not good at experimental science, because frankly, I know plenty of PhD scientists who got through, barely got through, because their research bench skills were not their strength.
Yes.
Their strength might have been their deductive skills, their data analysis skills, their communication skills, their, broad vision. You can have a lot of strengths, and they don't all have to be at the bench. Also, some people just don't like it. I liked it. I was lucky, and I was good enough at it to do it for a long time and drive a successful career. But not everybody is. It may not be your favorite part. So I think being a little introspective about what you really like about science, working with mentors and peers to figure it out. For me, it's actually data. I love data.
Okay.
I don't need to pipette. If someone else pipettes and still shows me their data, I'm happy. So when I moved into management, I was a little worried, like, am I still going to be doing science? I did so much science because I had 10 people reporting to me. Every day I got to look at crazy data, right? So fabulous. So you have to kind of know what your strength is, right? So I think that that transition into into understanding your strengths, anything is open. So I know plenty. If you speak to scientists doing informational interviews who are outside of academia, doing non-bench work, consulting, communications, nonprofit work, project management, program management. I mean, there's just a million things you can do. They all really like their jobs. And most of them. And so I guess you just can't really know until you try. So I don't consider just the pipetting as science. It's all science. Right.
Yeah, that is what I meant, like being on the bench versus being not on the bench.
Right. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about mentoring. what should we focus on in mentoring relationships, mentor-mentee relationship? And how do
Yeah,
we
so
build
I mean,
a, sorry, yeah, go ahead,
sorry,
please.
go ahead.
Oh, I was saying like how to build a strong mentor-mentee relationship.
Yeah, so I mean, if you're talking directly about your PI mentor, that's just, again, making a good choice at the outset from someone who's willing to work with you and
Yes.
not just over you.
Yeah.
People ask me, how do I manage up? Have you ever heard that phrase? Like, how do I manage
Manage.
my dysfunctional manager?
Yes.
And I usually say you should manage out, because if your manager isn't willing, or your mentor in your
Yes.
lab, your boss essentially, isn't willing to work with you to further your relationship and improve your communication and how you work together,
Yeah.
you're not going to convince them of that. They
Yes.
think they know how to do it. And it's pretty rare where I've seen people able to change a bad dynamic.
Yes.
So choosing first is really important. If you're talking about how to take advantage of mentoring in general, of course, we do not have one mentor. And you put yourself at risk if you have one mentor,
Yes.
because if that person isn't a good mentor or isn't supportive, then you're kind of in trouble.
Yes.
So the idea is really to meet people who you jive with throughout your career, who can serve as mentors at different times, for short periods, for long periods. Everybody has multiple mentors.
Yes.
And so you want to be propagating those relationships, be open to learning. I have a lot of webinars and content
Yes.
on this information on the Addgene blog about how to work with mentors. My favorite mentoring model is actually not the one-on-one kind of guru type model. It's actually group peer mentoring. Your peers really get you.
Yes.
So I really recommend that all trainees, postdocs, grad students form a peer mentoring group, even if there's no program where they are studying, of 5 or 6 peers and from different labs, doing different work. And I have a lot of information about how to do this. And I'm actually working with iBiology to create a whole training program for how to create peer mentoring groups. So that's my favorite model, is to really, so mentors don't answer your questions.
Yes.
They don't need to be more senior than you. They don't need to be more important.
Yeah.
They don't need to be, mentors really do is they ask you good questions.
Yes.
And they know you well enough to ask you the questions. So if I say to you, one of my favorite questions is, what do you like best about science? So what do you know? Like, what do you like best about science?
Communications.
So you like communications.
Yes.
Excellent. So you've started this,
Yes.
You've already taken your path. You're going to do webinars and podcasts and get the word out to people. That is, it's fantastic that you know that.
Yeah.
9 out of 10 scientists cannot answer that question. And so if you sit with a group of peers and really push each other to develop the answer to that question, you're going to make better choices about your career down the line. And so, and that's just getting started. So looking for those people who will ask you those tough questions, have those hard conversations. That's really one of my favorite ways of working mentoring into your life.
Thank you. So what value does diversity bring to all types bring to organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that we're past, people ask me to be on panels about how important diversity is, and I'm like, we're done with that. Diversity is absolutely crucial, and more importantly, inclusion obviously is the watchword of the day, which is you can't just have diversity. You have to actually make those people welcome, promoted, and successful in your workplace. We have to have it. I mean, the world is a diverse place, and by limiting the inclusion at your organization, you lose talent, you lose ideas, you lose the correct areas to focus on. And even just starting from the diversity of thought and way people approach the problems and think about things. And that has been my guiding principle since in my whole career. But upon coming to Addgene, I could actually take some action to make that important. And so 10 years ago, we started on a very aggressive diversity and inclusion goals, and we are realizing those goals. It takes a long time. Addgene's always been very inclusive and dedicated to diversity, but we've increased the racial diversity at Addgene. We've increased the types of diversity at Addgene, whether it be different abilities, neurodiversity, serving people with disabilities like mental illness and physical disabilities. We want the full person, because people work better when they can bring their full selves to work.
Yes.
And also, we represent scientists in 103 countries.
Yes.
We need to be representative of that beautiful diversity in the
Yes.
world to be
Yes.
really doing our jobs. We don't have 103 different countries represented at Addgene, but we have about 30,
Yeah.
which is pretty
Which
good
is
for
great.
100 people in our organization.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's not, leaders have to really take the lead on making this happen and putting in actionable steps. You can't just talk about it. You have to do the work.
Yes. So, when people apply for jobs at Addgene, what do you look for in the candidate?
Ooh, that's a good question. Obviously for some jobs we look for specific skills but I would say what we look for really is initiative. Because we're a nonprofit, and I think all organizations are really looking for that. We don't want to manage your everyday, every little action. We want you to be able to own your position at every level of the organization, at every position. We want you to be able to take charge, come up with ideas to make it better, do it with, do some parts of your job independently with your creativity and your innovation and really own it.
Okay.
And so we're looking on resumes for that type of demonstrations of that type of initiative. So people that started their own, webcast series, people that, were the head of the postdoc association, people that started a poster session for their department. We look for that little extra beyond the technical training that says this person has initiative. They felt passionately about something and they started it. So that's one thing we look for. Okay. The second thing is a little more obvious career one. People that have actually read the job description and read about Addgene before they write a cover letter. Yeah. Because we get a lot of cover letters that say, I want to cure cancer. That's why I'm a scientist. Well, Addgene's an open science service organization. We're not going to cure cancer over here. We're going to support the world that cures cancer, but that's not what we're about. So we really kind of just toss those away. So your cover letter really needs to reflect that you've spent 5 minutes meditating on the mission that we serve. And that's true for any position. Yes. You really need the cover letter to speak your voice and convince the people that you are interested in this particular job, and even if you have to come up with reasons and you're acting that way, eventually you will come to appreciate it, Yes. So I think those two things, we're looking for people who did that little bit of extra work to understand what we do. And then this kind of elusive characteristic of initiative.
Okay. And my last question for the day is, what do you enjoy the most outside of work? Your hobbies.
Outside of work, I just became a grandma, and my daughter is about to get married, so we have a lot of great family things going on. I'm an avid reader, mostly fiction, but I have been making myself do a lot more nonfiction reading. I read, during the pandemic, I think I had a Goodreads goal to read 80 books, and I read 100 because when I get anxious, I just go into a book. And so I read 100 books in 2020. I'm also a level 43 Pokemon Go player. Okay. So anybody out there wants to friend me, I'm happy to. And I like the New York Times crossword puzzle. Okay. So
those are great hobbies, and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
If our audience have any questions, this is the time to ask. I guess not. Well, thank you very much for your time and sharing your thoughts, Joanne.
Yeah,
I really enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah, okay. Bye-bye.